Hi, everyone. My name is Keith Whalen from RPI Consultants.
And I'm Richard Lee Stout.
And we're here today to present how much is that CloudSuite migration in the window?
Yes, we certainly are, Keith. A little bit about RPI Consultants. We are an Infor Alliance partner. We've been helping Infor Lawson and CloudSuite customers for well over 20 years, and we have extensive CloudSuite implementation experience over the past half decade.
You could almost say we're a CloudSuite company nowadays.
That's right.
Today, we are here to answer the question.
How much does it cost?
Dun, 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 dun. Well, the short answer is it depends, right? CloudSuite projects have a wide range of effort and cost. Across the many projects that we've done in several industries, we've seen them range between about $500,000, $500,000, and sometimes upwards of $5 million. Now, we estimate that about 95% fall in that range. We are aware of some projects that we haven't done that have been much larger, and probably there's been some that have been attempted to be done for less. And that's our presentation for today, so thank you very much.
Yep, there you have it.
We're going to walk you through what some of the factors are to help you understand what this might look like in your organization. And the number one factor is the application scope. It makes a big difference if all you're implementing is finance, if you have finance and supply management, if you have HR payroll, if you have talent, if you're adding on some new things, all those have factors. And here we just sort of try to show a range for how much each of those add, sort of at a minimum of finance implementation. If you're very simple and you're pretty much GLAP, maybe some assets, you're probably looking at a $500,000 implementation. If you are a single hospital healthcare system and all you run is finance, which is never the case, you're probably looking at that 1.25 type range, right? Supply management will add to that, HR, payroll, and so forth.
Absolutely. I mean, part of this application scope factor is where are you coming from, right? Are you currently on a hybrid cloud and potentially have to complete some portions of that multi-tenant migration? For example, Global HR, we have a lot of clients that are already on Global HR, which is the latest gen of the core HR application, but it's deployed either on-prem or maybe in a single tenant cloud deployment. We know that moving that functionality up to the multi-tenant is a prerequisite before doing other parts of the implementation, such as finance or payroll. Even that lateral shift
can have a wide range.
Can have a wide range, right? Because there are factors such as what is the current version of the software you're on. If you're on quite an older version of Global HR, that might be a bit of change. If you're running, for example, talent acquisition, and you're on that older candidate experience, which has already been deprecated, maybe doesn't exist on the newer platform. So you have some application changes. So you've got some modernization work to do to sort of bring your latest version solution up to meet that level that you're at in multi-tenant.
And you'll have some retraining to do with some of your core users as well. There are some other factors that also affect what this is going to look like. One of those is industry. If you look at maybe a financial services firm that uses procurement today, it's probably some simple requisitioning. Maybe they're using some activity tracking versus you taking healthcare, the extensive amount of users that are involved in purchasing and distributing goods within the systems, maybe centralized warehouses. You look at utilities, they tend to have work order systems that are key to them that have some pretty complex bidirectional interfaces.
Yeah.
Right? So each industry has its own nuances in each of these.
Yeah, and speaking of number of users, that's also a big factor, right, in the implementation effort. In terms of the number of employees in your organization, right? Like, at There's self-service functionality that's going to be rolled out to every employee in the organization. Obviously requires a robust training strategy. But there are core users, and when we say core users, that means business users that are really working heads down within your Infor software, for a full day. The number of core users that you have that need to adopt the new processes, the new system, that's going to impact your work effort. And transactional magnitude plays into that as well. And if we look at an accounts payable department, an AP department that processes maybe 1,000, 1,500 invoices a month. You're looking at maybe a manager and maybe 2 processors, and probably that entire team is enabled on all of the processes that happen within AP. Absolutely. And they have a good understanding of how to work through issues and resolve any errors or exceptions that come up. Compare that to a large organization with a central AP department that's processing 100,000 plus invoices per month. Well, those departments are set up more like a factory line where you've got different teams responsible for different parts of that process. And the overall transaction needs to seamlessly flow from one team to the next. And each transaction that you're touching, seconds matter when you're working at that scale. So you need a highly efficient operation.
Yeah, I mean, I think another big factor here that varies a lot is organizational complexity. And, there's transaction volume, but there's also decentralized processing. If it's one AP department that we are building processes around and testing with and supporting deployment, is very different than if you have 20 AP departments with potentially different nuances and different areas of the business.
Right, especially if they're not all following the same business processes or rules, or if they're not today, but a goal of your implementation is to standardize. And that can be because maybe you're coming from different source systems, right? Perhaps you have various systems out there that are an artifact of a recent merger or acquisition, and a goal of your project is to combine all those operations into CloudSuite. That adds a lot of complexity to the project.
Sometimes you have multiple different functions with the organization, right? You might be a city county that has a police department or a fire department. You might have a school system that you're running that requires its own HR department that has its own needs, its own nuances, its own action requests, right? So there, not only is it decentralized, it's not really standardizable because they're different, right? Yeah. So that obviously is going to add some effort.
Yeah, and when it comes to the payroll and time entry side of the application, your unions or bargaining units are going to potentially influence the work effort. If you've got an organization that maybe only has a couple of hundred employees, but might have 6 or 8 different unions involved, that can be a lot more work than implementing payroll for a 10,000 employee organization that uses the same set of payrolls across the board.
Absolutely. I would say similarly, especially with payroll, regional breadth is important, right? Payroll is more complex in some states than others. It is more complex to do for multiple states. And if you have operations in multiple states, you might have different regulatory compliance requirements. Some folks have operations internationally, and that adds to it as well.
Yeah, regulatory compliance is our last item that we can't forget, because whilst an organization might have some flexibility in how they adapt their business processes or their internal reporting to best align with application capabilities, oftentimes regulatory requirements are not flexible, and the system must be configured to produce outputs in a certain way, whether or not that functionality is delivered out of box.
Support ACFR reporting, for example. So another thing to look at is, what are the expectations in your organization in terms of what this is going to look like?
Right. I mean, here at RPI, we've done a lot of CloudSuite implementation projects that have ranged all the way from on one side, maybe an organization that's just looking to get up on the cloud with minimal transformation. Perhaps they've recently done an implementation, they're happy and confident in the structures and data that they have, and they're not really looking to re-engineer anything, all the way up to an organization that says, hey, the data and the processes that I have today in my system, they're not really working for me, and I want to set that all aside and approach this as a brand new implementation. Now, chances are your project is going to land somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. And in fact, most of our clients are seeking a prescriptive implementation, meaning their goal is to adopt best practices in business processes and application configuration, rather than being presented a long menu of different ways the system can be configured to do a process. They want to know, how are my industry peers finding success in doing this business process in the application? Let's adopt that process.
I mean, ultimately, that's the most efficient in terms of getting the most value, right? Because you are building a system configured to work at its best way. It does require an organization that's receptive to it, right? So whereas your procurement process, your IT department that might be processing this understands that, getting the business users on board sometimes can be a little bit challenging.
Absolutely.
Talking about rice.
Yeah, there are two big factors when it comes to the amount of effort that goes into rice. That is the number of technical artifacts that need to be created and the work breakdown. Who is going to be doing that development?
So this is such a big part of a lot of these projects, and customers always underestimate the effort. Can you explain to us a little bit why it's so complicated? I've been through 4 upgrades and all I did was repoint them. Why can't I do the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, the change in technology is really dramatic. It's not like anything that we've experienced prior to this. And the way that multi-tenant cloud applications talk to each other and integrate with other cloud apps or integrate with legacy on-prem apps is just different. And every interface that you have really needs to be rethought from the beginning and redesigned based upon its business requirements.
Okay. What about some of the other parts of these technical artifacts? Things like customizations or extensions,
right?
Reporting.
Infor CloudSuite is highly configurable, but the approach that we took to customization, particularly coming from Lawson, is quite different when you move to the cloud, and it's a different paradigm that project teams need to adopt. Oftentimes, as part of an implementation project, we're bringing forward customizations that are absolutely critical to business processes today, and require some creative thought when it comes to a fit gap analysis moving to the future state application. And whilst many of our clients enjoyed having a 4GL developer on staff or a team that was very well equipped and capable of extending and customizing the legacy system, there are some barriers to doing that with CloudSuite. One is that the system itself cannot really be customized to the same level that on-prem systems could, right? You have to use the configuration layer to modify how the application works or extend how the application works. And then the other barrier is simply the change in the tools and the technology. We really emphasize technical tool training as part of our implementation, but there's no substitute for experience and practice.
So understanding that there is a large effort, that volume becomes a big deal, right? And there's a great variance there. You might have an entity that has 177 interfaces and integrations, and you might have one that has 5. And the one that has 177 probably has a much larger IT team, but you got to understand that this got built over time and maintained separately. And all of a sudden, you're trying to condense this into a 3 to 6 month period. Whereas the one that has 5 might only have 1 developer, but they might be able to take that on, right? So it's both volume and how much can you take on. And that how much you can take on is not only based on the size of your team and the skills, it's like, what's the throughput going to be during this very tight period?
Yes.
Some folks try to mitigate these costs with offshore. We understand there's been a lot of mixed results with that. So
Certainly.
something to keep in mind there. One other thing to look at is the importance of organizational change here. This is a disruptive project. When you go into it and it's an upgrade, your goal is to minimize the impact to the end user. You want it to be seamless to them when they log off on Friday, log on Monday, get some differences training. But going to CloudSuite is really not that opportunity. This is going to be disruptive by nature. It's going to change the way they do certain daily processes. It's going to be a completely different UI.
Yeah.
Right. And it's important to understand that going in.
You really cannot underemphasize the importance of training on a project like this. In fact, that's one key piece of feedback that we hear time and time again, not only from our own clients, but other clients out there that have gone live on CloudSuite recently, is you cannot have enough training. And that's why our implementation approach really emphasizes training from the very beginning, and takes the approach of preparing project team members by providing focused and
Formal training.
Yeah, formal training throughout the duration of the project, but especially in preparation for each task or each phase in the project. At the very beginning, we're providing training to our super users on a generic test system before we've even built out the client solution, or before we've even brought in data from the legacy system. And we're preparing those super users to be able to make educated design decisions, move into the design phase. We also provide training to every tester prior to getting in and performing test scenarios, so they're prepared not only in terms of how to use the application and how to work through the screens they need to work through, but where does this fit overall into the project, and what is the value of doing testing, and what are they really looking for? And then, of course, as we're getting ready to go live, a comprehensive training program using multiple training mediums to ensure that every core user, every business user, and every end user is 100% prepared to adopt the new system.
Totally. And there are different types of training for different portions. At the beginning, you're learning about the application so that you can make design decisions. At the end, you're learning about the process of the system that's already built out for how you're going to perform a task. The other thing that we've discovered is hugely important, should be included in every CloudSuite implementation, some level of change management. How much, I think, depends on scale of the organization, change resistance, and how many core users are going to be affected. But in general, you want to be able to articulate the why this is happening, right? Because not everybody participated in that decision or is on board. And you want to be able to communicate that, and you want to be able to set expectations along the way, right? And change management plan and process helps you formalize that, make sure you're doing it, make sure you're becoming aware of any issues that rise up. Another issue that affects effort is resource and organizational constraints.
Yeah, first and foremost, we have the availability of the project team, right? Now, of course, this is a big work effort on the consulting side to do a project of this scale, but it also a large work effort on your core project team, right? They're going to be spending a good portion of their day, depending on which phase you're in, working on this project, and balancing that with their everyday workload becomes extremely challenging. That's why we recommend that every project be prepared to implement some level of backfill, so key project team members aren't being pulled between day-to-day operations and participating in design, build, and testing.
Yeah, and some of that backfill can be strategically placed during times that the organization is going to drain certain resources. So open enrollment, a year end, things, fiscal year end, things of that nature. Another thing to keep in mind is what the competing projects and priorities are, right? So if you're in the middle of doing this CloudSuite migration and all of a sudden you have an acquisition that you got to integrate into your current system, that is going to distract system resources and can ultimately have an effect on timelines.
Absolutely.
Why are timelines so important?
Well, all this being said, a lot of organizations that do understand their resourcing constraints are, perhaps might try and mitigate that by having a very long implementation period. We've seen organizations request a 2+ year implementation period, knowing that everybody's going to be really working 2 jobs during that period. But there are some inherent challenges with extending out a timeline that's maybe 1.5 or 2x what the vendor recommends. One very obvious one that comes to mind is that multi-tenant software is evolving and updating
Yeah.
all the time, right? So there are 2 major update windows each year where big application changes are released. And you want to minimize the number of those big update periods that your project needs to navigate around, where you might need to update processes that are currently under design, or retrain users, or perhaps even just steer project activity around those big
and guidance. There's guidance for the ones that are coming up, but 2 years out, that's harder to look through.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I would recommend that rather than simply extending out a timeline, clients that are concerned about this should look at potentially phasing out their project. Maybe working on finance and supply management for a year, and then pivoting to work on human capital management, talent management for a year. In that way, your project management and IT teams aren't biting off more than they can chew, and are really able to focus in and participate in the project to a level that's going to enable them to successfully adopt and maintain and own that system after go live. The other benefit of phasing is it reduces the risk that a delay in one area could have a domino effect, pushing out the go live that maybe other areas are relying on, and having an outsized impact on the cost of a delay.
Mm-hmm. Collateral damage is the cost of those resources that we're ready to go.
Yeah.
So hopefully in general, this is helpful to understand what the nuances are and maybe help you paint a big picture. We'd be happy to provide a budgetary estimate with some details behind it. If you reach out to us, just a few questions, and we can give some context around what this entails and what you might be able to have an effect of if you take a different approach or take on much of the work. One of the things I get concerned about is I hear a lot of numbers get thrown out without context.
Right.
And sometimes you're just looking for a ballpark. Sometimes those ballparks can be quite a bit off. And I would always ask, have you actually implemented for that? So having the detail, I think, helps you sort of flesh that out a little bit. So just email us at questions@rpic.com. We'll be happy to work with you and give you something that hopefully provides value to you in your planning, or for anything else that you'd like to talk to us about.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.